Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Courtney Battle, and I'm the executive director here at HAND, and want to be the first to welcome you to today's webinar, sharing more details on the survey for the Housing Indicator Tool 5.0. If you're here with us today, you should have received the survey request from our wonderful partners at the Urban Institute, and you're going to hear more details on that survey from them soon. But just as a refresher for anyone who may not be familiar with HAND, we're a membership collective of professionals working across the housing and community development space with a shared mission of creating more equitable communities through the provision of affordable housing and services that allow individuals to thrive. We serve as a convener, educator, and activator for our members. So that means bringing them together to build key partnerships, building their capacity through learning opportunities, and activating our members toward policy solutions that we know are one of the key drivers behind housing production and preservation. And the HIT does exactly that. It helps us to activate our network of members and partners to address our region's housing affordability and supply challenges. So we're so excited that you have made the commitment to be here today, to be a part of the survey and the updating of the Housing Indicator Tool 5.0. This is such important work that we're doing, and we truly appreciate your dedication. So I'm going to pass the mic over to Stephen Palmer. He's HAND's Director of Public Policy and will also be your primary point of contact on all things HIT. So please feel free to reach out to him with any questions that you may have. And last but not least, we want this to be informal. We encourage everyone, if you can, turn on your video cameras, please feel comfortable asking any questions that come up during the duration of this webinar, or if some come up afterward. We want you to feel comfortable coming to us with any concerns that you may have. And again, want this to be an informal and safe space for you to address any questions or concerns. So with that, we'll pass things over to Stephen, and really appreciate everyone being here today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Courtney. Hi, everyone. Like Courtney said, I'm Stephen. I'm HAND's Director of Public Policy. I'm super excited to see you all today, and thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. Courtney gave a great description of what HAND is. We can go to the next slide, Tiana. And thank you to Tiana, our wonderful colleague who picked extremely good welcome music earlier today for what is in DC a very gloomy Wednesday afternoon, but we appreciate you sharing it with us. So we're here to talk about the Housing Indicator Tool, or the HIT. Above all, we're really here to get your questions answered and make this update of the HIT as easy for you as possible. We're all kind of on camera if you'd like to be, and we welcome you to be. Feel free to throw any questions in the chat as they come up throughout the presentation today, and we will have time to answer any and all questions in the chat at the end, and we'll also give you an opportunity to ask a question of us or our friends at Urban live at the end. So we're also recording this, and we'll send it out to those who can't be there, or if there's other people on your team who you want to watch it or get any further questions answered. And like Courtney said, you can always reach out to me or our friends at Urban to figure out how best to complete the survey or to answer any other questions. So with that, we can go to the next slide, Tiana. Thank you. So today we're going to talk a little about what the HIT is, and that's the Housing Indicator Tool, or the HIT. We say it enough times that we've given it an acronym. And then we're going to hear from our colleagues at Urban about the results from last year. Then we'll hear from a couple of housing directors who have participated in the HIT about what they've gotten out of the tool and lessons learned from participating. Then we'll hear a bit more about the 2024 survey, what's new, and some tips and tricks on how to best complete it. And then, like I said, we'll open the floor for Q&A. So if we can go to the next slide, let's talk a little bit about the HIT, or the Housing Indicator Tool. Next slide, please, as well. Thank you. So the HIT is a platform for tracking the region's progress on housing affordability. It looks at how well the region is producing, preserving, and protecting affordable housing. It is, on one hand, a tool for accountability towards meeting housing goals at the regional and local levels, but it also goes into what makes a good housing toolkit and how that toolkit is actually deployed in each jurisdiction. As you all know, there's not one silver bullet solution to fixing our affordable housing crisis. And so the tool helps kind of contextualize a little bit uh, the different tools that are needed to really address the problem. It's also educational. It makes very clear the link between housing and racial equity. I know I don't have to tell those on the meeting today. When we talk about affordable housing, we're talking about racial equity. They are really one and the same. Um, and so the tool tries to help educate and spread that message and talk about how producing, preserving, and protecting affordable housing is one of the best ways to advance racial equity in each jurisdiction and in the region at large. And lastly, it has calls to action for all sectors. It's not just what should government be doing, it's what should the private sector be doing, what should advocates be talking about, what should philanthropy be doing, things like that. So it is really tries to be as comprehensive as possible, and to serve the region as well as you all who are working in the region at the jurisdictional level. If we can go to the next slide, Tiana. So our friends at Urban will be on soon and can talk more about this, but how does the HIT actually work? So it looks at affordability by specific income bands. It does not, nothing is just affordable or not affordable. There are obviously there's a wide spectrum of affordability, and the HIT tries to encompass the full spectrum. It has jurisdiction level targets. This is a regional tool, but it's obviously driven by local action. Housing, as I don't have to tell you all, is an inherently local thing. And so we keep the targets at the jurisdictional level, but to figure out how the region as a whole can best address and solve the affordable housing crisis. And is connected to locally produced forecasts and is consistent across localities. And we're excited to have 20 jurisdictions represented on the HIT. And finally, if we can go to the next slide, excuse me. So who uses this tool and how? I kind of alluded to it earlier, but this is something that can be used by anyone working in the housing space. Obviously, there's a lot of use for advocates, researchers, developers, but I want to talk mostly about how it can be helpful to you, to the public sector folks working to protect, produce, and preserve housing in your jurisdiction at the government level. So I actually come from government. I worked for a while at the DC Council. And so I know firsthand that a lot of your job involves getting a lot of questions asked of you by elected officials, advocacy groups, constituents, stakeholders, sister agencies. And those questions are often extremely specific, very, I would say, let's say, annoying questions, requests. What's going on in this particular area? What are you doing? How many buildings do we build last year? Whatever. We hope that in that way it's helpful to you just to provide more information. Our wonderful partners at Urban are providing a really kind of accurate, in-depth analysis of production, preservation, protection of affordable housing. We hope that kind of helps you with another tool for you to just have better, cleaner information about what you and the jurisdiction's doing. I also know that you get a lot of calls that say, why have you personally not solved the affordable housing crisis yet in our jurisdiction? And this, I hope, helps you case make a little bit to show this is what we are doing. This is what other places are doing in the region. And kind of provide context to those elected officials or constituents or advocacy groups or whoever to really help kind of situate your work in the broader context of affordable housing in the region. So in other words, this is hopefully a tool for you to make your jobs easier and your lives easier. So with that, I will pass it to Leah over at Urban to talk about what we learned from the 2023 survey. Leah, all you.
Thank you, Stephen. I'm just going to, if you want to go to the next slide, Tiana, thank you. I'm just going to briefly recap some of the results from last year's data collection so that everyone on the call who might not be familiar with the HIT gets some examples of what we do with the data besides putting it on the dashboards in the tool. I just want to call out, we really appreciate all of you who work with us on the HIT data collection and who are incredibly dedicated to creating more housing and more affordable housing across the capital region. You go to the next slide. 12 out of the 19 jurisdictions participating in the HIT produced fewer units in 2023 than they did in 2022, resulting in fewer units overall for both the greater DC and Baltimore areas. The city of Baltimore did not report total units last year, so there are only 4 jurisdictions in their 2023 total for the greater Baltimore region. The 7 jurisdictions who did increase production were the District of Columbia, the City of Rockville, Anne Arundel, Arlington, Fairfax, Howard, and Montgomery counties. Next slide. Looking at new housing units built in 2023 as a percent of the estimated annual goal to accommodate future housing demand, Greater DC overall produced about 85% of its goal, and the Baltimore area 36%. Falls Church, Arlington, DC, Frederick, and Montgomery all produced at least 80% of their annual goals. But there were also 9 jurisdictions that did not even produce half of the units in their annual targets. Next slide. 2023 marked the 5th year of data collection for the jurisdictions in the greater DC area. Over the last 5 years, greater DC jurisdictions reported producing nearly 109,000 new housing units. The area has not reached the annual housing goal of 25,000 units each year, overall producing at a level of about 87% of that 5-year goal. 4 jurisdictions, DC, Loudoun, Fairfax, and Montgomery County, in part due to their size, accounted for 2/3 of production during that period. Next slide. Looking at each jurisdiction's production from 2019 to 2023 relative to their targets, we estimated back in 2019, gives us a sense of whether the production is spread proportionally across the region according to where we expected to see future housing demand. We found that 6 jurisdictions exceeded their targets, including relatively smaller jurisdictions like Alexandria and Arlington, who have produced beyond our estimates. Loudoun and Montgomery counties are also on track at 95% and 99% respectively. Next slide. To meet the affordability challenges of our current residents and the demand for affordable housing by future residents, we need much higher production levels of affordable housing. In 2023, across the capital region, over 3,600 committed affordable units were produced, 71% of which were affordable to households with incomes of 50 to 80% of the area median. The region produced 425 units affordable to households with the lowest incomes, including 200 units set aside for permanent supportive housing. Fairfax County and DC produced the most affordable units, accounting for 60% of new committed affordable units in the greater DC area in 2023. Next slide. But there are many jurisdictions working on their affordable development pipeline. Nearly 30,000 affordable units were in the pipeline or under construction. This represented an increase in units in some stage of development for these jurisdictions from last year. In total, there are about 8,900 units under construction and over 20,000 in the pipeline. The definitions do vary a little, but most units in the pipeline have some preliminary plan approvals or have received funding approval from the jurisdiction. And next slide. On each dashboard, we also currently track 21 different policies for local jurisdictions because we know that addressing our regional affordable housing challenges will require a portfolio approach and policies in all areas to preserve existing affordability, produce more housing, and protect people from discrimination and displacement. On this table, we highlight a few of the ones we've been tracking. For example, nearly all jurisdictions have a homebuyer assistance program. And with jurisdictions running out of federal resources for emergency rental assistance, we changed the question last year to ask about programs that use local funding and identified 9 in the DC area and 5 in the Baltimore area who provide these resources. And while many jurisdictions have housing trust funds, 10 have identified significant dedicated revenue streams for those funds. I'm going to pass back to Stephen now. If you want to see more from last year's launch event, there's a video and slides available, and I can drop that in the chat.
Thank you so much, Leah. Really appreciate that. So now I'm very excited to have a couple folks who have participated in the HIT and are big boosters of the survey and the tool, and are going to talk a little bit about their experience with it. So I'd love to welcome first Aspasia Zapolia, Director of Prince George's County Department of Housing and Community Development.
Great. And thank you for inviting us, Stephen.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So Aspasia, I just want to ask you really kind of generally if you could share, any reflections on what made you choose to participate in the HIT, the value it provided to you, any lessons learned in collecting the data, things like that. So the floor is yours, and thank you for being here and for participating.
And for everybody who looked at the slides briefly that you presented, I think it's very clear that we didn't decide to participate because we're the #1 student in the group. So we didn't come in to get kudos out of this exercise. But it is that sort of thing that is necessary when you try to solve a big issue, in sort of being honest about what the status is and where you need to be. The other thing I'll say is that, I'm here as the Department of Housing and Community Development, but when we talk about housing production, it's really planning, it's really entitlement processes, and it's a lot of political will for projects that, constituents may or may not want to see. So we as a department do not control ourselves the destiny of housing in Prince George's County, but we do have a significant role to play. And so how we use that data is when conversations internally with different departments or with our finance team and our OMB team come to the forefront, we like to show them what others are doing. And this is our way of advocating for tools, even in very difficult budget seasons, right? So because there are all these hard decisions that have to be made. So that is how we have used the tool effectively, going back and saying, look at what other jurisdictions of similar annual budgets or slightly less or slightly more are putting forward, and that has been effective for us. So although we're not the best student in the class, I do believe we have shown the fastest growth of tool development within the last few years because we're catching up and comparing ourselves to the others and having this educational approach internally has been very helpful. Also, very selfishly, I really like the demographic data that you have for every jurisdiction, because every time we're on the run to put in a proposal for something, rather than have to stress about it, I just go there and say, based on the HUNT tool, this is what our needs are, and it's good enough. It doesn't have to be the last month's data, but it is good enough, and it is good to have this on the background, just rather than us just saying what it is. The last thing I'll say is, two more things. One, since we had to start working together to report data to the HUNT team, we went ahead and created our own dashboard, because then we found it very helpful to have our own internal monitoring of how our pipeline looks like, where our resources are going. And actually, our elected officials appreciated this, because that gave them also a perspective and an understanding of where all these approvals are going. So we started actually mapping that in our website, and we are even putting dots on where the projects are. So it kind of helped us evolve a little bit our transparency and accountability tools and our measurement tools. And the last thing I'll say that I really enjoy on the tool is there is this landing page that says, who are you if you cannot afford the 1,300, 1,400 unit apartment, right? And we use that also very often when we talk with constituents or through planning approval processes to explain that it is really affordable housing is just a necessity, and it is something that we all need. It is workforce housing, although we do like to call it affordable housing because it's a great term that we're not going to shy away from. And so it really has helped us on multiple venues. So we appreciate the partnership.
Thank you so much, Aspasia. I think that was a wonderful kind of description of the different ways the tool can be helpful, and that it can both be kind of on the narrative, more specific, who are the people that might be affected, and kind of putting more of the color to the kind of wonky state of affordable housing, but then also more on the kind of systemic structural lens about where and how things are being built and what policies are in the toolkit. So thank you so much for participating. And I love what you said. This is not about just being the best in the class, whatever. This is about, the very, very hard job. I think what your statement, Aspasia, highlighted is that everyone on this call, if you're working for a jurisdiction on housing, planning, et cetera, you have an extremely hard job. And I think our number one goal is that this tool makes your job a little bit easier. So thank you so much, Aspasia, for that. Now I'd like to welcome Helen McIlvaine, Director of the City of Alexandria's Office of Housing. And Helen, thank you so much for being here. I had the same question for you as I did for Aspasia. Could you share any reflections on what made you choose to participate in the HIT, the value provided to you, any lessons learned, things like that?
Great. Well, yes, I'm very glad to, Stephen, and thanks so much for inviting me today to talk about Alexandria's experience. I first want to thank you and the whole HAND team, because I think you have been such a great convener around all of our housing issues and challenges. And I think meetings like this are exactly, why we do it, to borrow a few words, each one teach one, and we all learn from one another. So it's really great. So the city was the first jurisdiction in the Washington region to undertake a housing master plan. We did that in 2013. And I think one of the best things that came from that, and of course came on the last night of probably 50 meetings over 3 or 4 years, was how are we going to keep track of how we're doing? And so we developed a matrix to track our progress. And that's why this is such a great tool, because it allows us to be doing that locally, but also as a region. And I think the reason it's important is because, I completely agree about, you're going to have years where you've have a lot of production. I will say our very honest staff in the Office of Housing keep me from persuading them that we should count those units that are going to be delivered in early January, because our numbers just would look so much better if we did. But I think it's a very honest accounting of, where we've ended up, but also how might we tweak our policies, our tools, our investments, and even projects to be a lot more intentional. And this goes, we have not used the HIT in a way to really be part of our equity checklist, but I look forward to doing that as that part of the tool evolves, because that's something that's very important to us, and something we, while I completely agree with you, housing is equity. It's being very intentional to make sure that we are reaching our own expectations of ourselves is very important. So just to say, we're both tracking our individual progress as a jurisdiction. We're looking to try ideas we get from other jurisdictions and see what are the tools, what are the things that are really impactful. And a few years ago, when we were working to preserve housing through redevelopment, we came up with a zoning tool that we're now using regularly that exchanges a lot of density in exchange for 40% AMI units. So that was very, important to us. We aren't able to count them in your 30% AMI units, but it's meeting a very, helping to meet a very important need in the city. The other thing, and I'm glad it was said, was, the external, the regional conversations are very important, but so are the internal conversations that participating in the HIT process encourages. It gets us talking a few more times a year. We have a very collaborative relationship with our Department of Planning and Zoning, but how do we count units? How do we look at the permit process? How are we achieving our goals for both, housing at all levels, and then of course for housing in income ranges? The city formally endorsed the COG regional housing initiatives. So we're very appreciative that this tool was developed to really help us keep track of that, because we think accountability is a good thing, but more importantly, we think, learning how to improve things is good. The other thing I will also say is that, I think that people should feel encouraged to do this, because obviously your numbers will wax and wane, and while it's always good, we're all wired to want to be on the top of the leaderboard. We learn as much from our peers who are doing that, and from really diving in and saying, where do we fall short and how do we do that? That's just good housing hygiene. So at any rate, thank you for this, and I'm glad to answer any questions. I would also say this was extremely helpful as the group of localities was going through the regional fair housing assessment. And, I think it's just a case of where, the more information, the more we know. The comment about demographics, who are we serving, who are we not serving enough, I think is just all very helpful. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Helen. That was such great description of how you use the tool, and we're so happy to hear that it was helpful, especially in tracking your progress and kind of giving you that awareness of how things are going. You're right that housing waxes and wanes, it's cyclical, and so we're hoping that the tool can just provide you with data to do your jobs better and more easily. So thank you so much, Helen, for being here and for sharing your story today. So now we're going to pass back to our colleagues at the Urban Institute. I'll pass to Rodrigo to talk about the 2024 survey.
All right. Thank you, Stephen. And I want to start off by thanking all the jurisdictions for all the work they do to fill out the survey every year. And it was great to hear from Aspasia and Helen about how they found it helpful. We do understand that it is a lot of work and that it may cause a lot of questions as you're filling it out. So hopefully I am able to address some of those questions right now in the next few slides, but feel free to contact us with any other questions or concerns through email as they come up. Next slide, please. So the process itself has remained consistent from year from year. So after a planning and updating stage in the fall, we sent out the surveys last week. And if you have not received it or are unable to find it, please send us an email and we will be happy to make sure that you get your copy of the survey. All jurisdictions will have until January 27th to fill it out and submit to Urban. The data processing stage will run from late January through April, and we will share the results at the launch event on June 5th. Next slide, please. Right, the survey itself. So the survey requests information on 3 major areas: production, preservation, and policies. The production section includes questions on things like the number of permits and permitted units, affordable and market rate units completed, and the affordable housing pipeline. The preservation section asks about the number of units preserved, both subsidized and unsubsidized, and the existence of any preservation inventories. The policy section is made up of a series of questions on existing policies that jurisdictions have to encourage production and preservation of affordable housing and protection of the residents from displacement and impacts of climate change. Next slide, please. This year, we have added new policy questions on zoning, asking about your local zoning policies. We wanted the HIT to reflect what jurisdictions are doing to expand housing production in ways other than direct investment in housing production and preservation. All the new questions in the survey are labeled as new, so it should be easy to identify them within the survey itself. And you can see some of the questions here, including number of residential land zoned single family, the percentage of residential land zoned for single family, questions about potential shock clocks, zoning process for multifamily production, and the such. Next slide, please. So regarding tips for completing the survey, one of the biggest tips we have is to start early. The survey will likely require coordination from various departments, but most policy questions can be completed right now as 2024 is starting to close. And if any questions do come up regarding the new zoning questions, we will have more time to address them and get back to you if the process starts early. Next slide, please. So we also want to go over a couple other items on the survey that we get the most questions about. For example, in the building permit section, we ask for both the numbers of residential building permits and the total number of units permitted, along with the number of multifamily units permitted. So these are two different numbers that we're asking for in the total number of residential building permits and the number of units permitted. And we do calculate total single family units by taking the total units that are provided and subtracting the total multifamily units that are provided within the survey. So these questions can be found in rows 6 through 8 of the survey. Next slide, please. So in regards to preservation tracking, we are asking for 2 separate data points. We want to know if your tracking units as preserved. This will be in rows 27 to 30 of the survey, as well as proactive tracking of at-risk properties that may require actions to preserve affordability. These are the preservation inventories, and this will be rows 40 through 43 of the survey. If you have any other questions or clarifying questions, feel free to reach out to us or reach out to me at rgarcia@urban.org, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that may come up. I will pass it back to Stephen.
Thank you so much, Rodrigo. Really appreciate it. And Rodrigo and Leah at Urban do a lot to make this as painless as possible for you, and to kind of provide your results, your responses from last year for the policy questions to kind of move things along as quickly as possible. So we really appreciate the work of our friends at the Urban Institute to conduct this really rigorous and wonderful survey. So with that, we've reached the question and answer portion. I welcome anybody online to unmute, pose any questions to on the tool, how to complete the survey, any and all of the above. And I see one question in the chat about whether the slides will be made available. We will, yes, we will be sharing the recording, which should show you the slides, and we can also send specific slides if need be as well. So any questions? I might, just to kick it off, I might ask Rodrigo and Leah, the tips you gave were really helpful. Is there any kind of technical, tips on how the jurisdictions can most, I would say, easily or with the least pain submit things to you? Do you see any issues typically that kind of cause headaches that we can be forewarned about now?
No. So we have used an Excel workbook to try to make it a little bit easier to provide the detail we're asking about the addresses for the new committed affordable units. We have tried to use cell validation for the cells in the workbook so that you get to choose yes, no, rather than typing free response for as many questions as we could. If you think you have a workbook that doesn't have validation, let us know. We're happy to fix that for you. And particularly with the new zoning questions, most of them are not yes, no, but most of them are multiple choice. We tried to provide the answers in the text of the question so that you could see them without having to scroll through the cell where you place the answer, so that it's more transparent about what the choices are, because I imagine you may have to share and discuss those. But otherwise, send the workbook back to us.
Perfect. And on that, Leah, it's also a good time for jurisdictions to look at their existing current dashboard on the tool and let you know any issues they see, things to change, things like that, right?
Yes, I did want to flag that. I think we mentioned that in our email, but I know some folks have had updates over time as they maybe have taken a look at the systems in which they are trying to organize and collect data themselves and made improvements over time about how they are tracking properties, that they've shared updated counts with us, in particular around either permits, the total number of units or affordable units. We're happy to make changes to previous year's data if you provide that information, ideally at the same time the new survey data is coming in. That's the most useful time for us to do that. And again, if there are other things that you feel are incorrect or we've coded incorrectly from your survey responses in the past on the policies, please do let us know. The easiest time to make updates to the dashboards is in the spring before we do the launch.
Thank you for that, Leah. Any other questions from anyone present in the meeting? If not, if we can go to that penultimate slide, Tiana. Thank you. So looking ahead, please confirm receipt of the survey. You all should have an email from Rodrigo at rgarcia@urban.org with the survey with your kind of customized Excel document. Please confirm that you got that and submit your survey responses by January 27th. As always, you can reach out to the folks at Urban or ourselves at Hand to ask any and all questions, no matter how small. And then get excited because the HIT launch this year will be at the 34th Annual Meeting and Housing Expo that Hand holds at the Omni Showroom in DC. Again, it's on June 5th. And in between January and June, we'll be reaching out to the jurisdictions to make sure the info is correct, to talk about our findings and to kind of discuss how we can be helpful throughout the launch process. So with that, I appreciate everybody coming. Last plug, any questions? Feel free, hop off mute. Okay, well, in that case, I put the link to the HIT in the chat a few times. I appreciate you all coming and working with us on this wonderful tool, and I'm really excited to see HIT 5.0 very soon. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.